Welcome back to the Financial Symmetry Show, where we are passionate about helping you craft your ideal retirement. In honor of International Women's Day on March 8th, we have a special podcast today planned to focus on improving the financial and retirement outcomes for women across the globe. The theme for International Women's Day in 2023 is Digit All, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. So what we want to talk about today is how we're seeing those digital innovations improve women's retirement outcomes. And according to the United Nations, bringing women and other marginalized groups into technology results in more creative solutions and has greater potential for innovations that meet women's needs and promote gender equality. Their lack of inclusion, by contrast, comes with massive costs. As per UN Women's Gender Snapshot 2022 report, women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the gross domestic product of low and middle income countries in the last decade, a loss that will grow to $1.5 trillion by 2025 without action. According to a recent report by the Center for American Progress, the gender wage gap, which we've discussed in previous episodes, costs women $1.6 million in retirement savings over the course of their careers. In addition, women have longer life expectancies and are more likely to be the primary caregivers for children, aging parents, and these things can limit their ability to maintain paid employment. As financial advisors, we have seen the rapid advancement in financial technology that is helping narrow these gaps and improve the retirement outcomes for women. So today we want to highlight some of our favorite tools and techniques that are advancing these long-term financial and retirement security outcomes. We're going to focus on the 4 C's today. We'll start out with cash flow, run into compensation, discuss care, and finally compound interest. So Haley, why don't you start us off? You are known around the Financial Symmetry office as the cash flow queen. So tell us more about how we can improve our retirement outcomes with cash flow planning.
Yes. So like Allison said, our first C is cash flow. And what we mean by that is tracking your spending. Knowledge can be super powerful here, and this gives you the ability to know where your money is going and the opportunity to check in and see if it aligns with your priorities and your values. This can be helpful for people who maybe get to the end of the month and are not completely sure what happened to their entire paycheck, or for people who could use that information to see how they're progressing towards financial goals like retirement or building an emergency fund or saving to purchase a new home. Now, this doesn't mean just budgeting, although that is extremely helpful practice to participate in, but the retroactive monitoring to see what actually happened to your money. So where did your money go? You can write a budget every month, but if you don't check back in on where you actually spent your money, it's not going to be as helpful. And I know a lot of people assume that it's going to be an incredibly daunting task. Most people, when we ask them during our new client meetings if they track their spending currently, they say no. Whether it's due to the hassle, the time commitment, or the lack of financial organizations, there are plenty of reasons why someone doesn't do this because we're busy people. We're juggling households, careers, family, friends, everything under the sun. But thankfully, we live in the digital age. There's so many ways that technology makes this a lot easier for us than it was 5 or 10 years ago. There are countless apps and websites that can help you do this. So here at Financial Symmetry, we actually have our own in-house tracking tool in our Client Center portal that will track your spending against the targets we help you set in your financial plan so that you get that live feedback on how you're doing. If you're doing this on your own, there's also plenty of apps and websites either that are free of charge with ads or maybe have a small annual fee for you to use that allow you to do this as well. Most of these will allow you to both budget and then track how you actually did. And then a lot of them have little perks like setting rules for your reoccurring expenses so that they categorize themselves automatically and cuts down on the time that you have to spend really getting into the details. So for example, software would be eventually able to know like every time you go to Harris Teeter, that's most likely a grocery run, and you get to spend a little bit more time just looking at the big picture and seeing how that reflects what's actually happening with your finances. So maybe when you're reviewing it, you notice that you have a few subscriptions that aren't useful to you anymore, that it's time to cancel. I know this is always my personal reminder of if I haven't used it in the past month and I don't plan to use it in the next month, it's time for that to go. Or maybe that you notice you spend a lot in a particular area that's not really a necessity and also doesn't really bring value to your life. And that's time to kind of cut down and be conscious of that spending. I personally enjoy spending money, so I know that I'm preaching to myself here, even though I am a financial advisor. It's really important to monitor your reality. So maybe you can use your phone to set a reminder to check in, or whatever software that you're using, send you emails or alerts to check back in. I like to shoot for once a week. Some people, it's maybe needed once or twice a month. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but the more you do check in, the more top of mind it will be. And helpful when you're contemplating a big purchase, or maybe there's an impulse buy that you are faced with. If you're able to regularly meet those spending targets and goals, you're going to be setting yourself up for a healthier financial situation in the long term. And that information is going to be really helpful when planning retirement as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Haley. It sounds like some of these digital tools can be a modern day accountability partner to help people stay on track toward their goals and really meet those expense needs. I like the tips and tricks you talked about there with the subscriptions in particular, that maybe if you're not using those anymore, it reminded me a little bit too about cleaning out your closet and thinking about clothes you maybe haven't worn in a year or two, and do you really still need to keep those? And in this case, keep paying those expenses that you might not even be using. So technology is making that a lot simpler. We don't have to save every single receipt, write them down in pencil and tally everything up in our little notebooks anymore. We can set some of these automated systems up to help us stay on track. And as we're talking about cash flow, really, Haley talked a lot about expenses, but what we want to think about is income minus expenses. And we've talked a lot about the gender wage gap previously. So we want to go into our next C and talk about that income side of the equation. Grace, tell us more about some of the strategies and tools we can use now on compensation.
Our second C is compensation, which is a fancy way of saying your income, so money coming into your household. Historically, women have had lower compensation than males in the same roles and industries. So we wanted to touch on that to help women who may be underpaid or perhaps need to look at ways to increase income to help provide some guidance there. So wages are on the rise. We've seen that particularly over the past couple of years and with inflation as well. But we've seen an interesting trend in that people who have stayed in their current roles have generally seen raises. Typically, it's an annual raise, generally a few percent, maybe a little bit more over the past year, given that inflation's been higher than it had been for decades prior to last year. But a really interesting trend is that people that have switched employers saw a much bigger bump in pay over the past couple of years. So if you're looking to increase your income or feel that you're underpaid in your current role, that is something to look into. That most people that switched jobs had a much bigger increase in pay than those that stayed. Because if you stay in your current role, there's kind of an unspoken agreement that you're okay with working for the amount you're being paid for. So we encourage you, if you have not done so, to just periodically, maybe once per year, search on the internet and try to find out what are people in your current role, in your area, and in your industry making in your line of work. Generally, you can find a range and maybe the median. And so if you find that you fall below that median, it might be time to ask for a raise. And I know it takes some boldness, but it will absolutely be worth it if you end up getting it. And the worst thing you get is a no. But then there's the alternative, looking for another place of employment as well. And the labor market's been really hot over the past couple years. Of course, we're seeing some slowing, especially in the tech sector, but it's still really hot in the services and hospitality industries. So if that's your industry, it might be time to search around. So as far as resources for this, I already touched on, just searching online to find what your job might be worth, but a website that we highly recommend is called ladiesgetpaid.com. They have a blog, a book, and a lot of resources if you're looking to negotiate for a higher salary and get paid what you're worth.
That's great. Thank you, Grace. And as we mentioned, a lot of times women are responsible for care, both for children and for aging parents. And this can mean some years out of the workforce. It can also mean maybe during those years or months out of the workforce, you're not on the receiving end of those bonuses or income adjustments, cost of living adjustments that maybe your peers are getting during those years. So the cost of caregiving plays a major role in women's lifetime income. And when I think about care and I think about technology, I think about the Disney movie Big Hero 6. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen that with Baymax. He's sort of a big marshmallow character, a robot healthcare companion. And I always think, wouldn't it be great if we all had a Baymax and that would take care of us when we get sick? And I don't know that I would trust that big marshmallow robot with my kids, but maybe with an aging parent or with myself when I'm sick. It seems like it would be useful for him to dispense medicine and maybe make some soup. We're not there yet. So, traditionally, most countries are thinking about caregiving as a woman's role. And this really results in reduced work hours, turning down promotions, or sometimes leaving jobs altogether. And according to Cindy Hounsel, president of the Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement, women who become caregivers for an elderly parent or friend are more than twice as likely to end up living in poverty than if they aren't caregivers. Additionally, we all know there's a childcare crunch. Obtaining quality childcare can be very difficult, very expensive. And we're also seeing that industry very squeezed. They're having trouble keeping workers at the rates that they're paying. So we see this on both ends in terms of caring for children and in terms of caring for aging parents. A national study from Ready Nation pegged the economic losses from the country's underpowered childcare industry at $122 billion a year, up from $57 billion in 2018. Of parents surveyed with children between 0 to 3, 23% said they'd been fired because of childcare problems. 26% said they'd quit a job over childcare. 37% said they had their pay or hours reduced because of childcare. And 41% said they turned down a job offer due to childcare concerns. So these are really some statistics that can open your eyes to what people might be going through. There are a lot of options that have opened up to us more recently in the past 15, 20 years than had been available prior. I think this has traditionally been thought of as a personal responsibility, family problem, and there weren't that many resources outside the home or your immediate family members. But there are a lot of companies and a lot of innovations that are changing the way childcare happens, the way elderly care happens. Some of those are resources like care.com, where you can find babysitters, you can search for nannies or an au pair or someone to come and help with your childcare concerns. With those, you obviously want to run background checks if you're hiring somebody that's going to be coming into your home. Another one that I've actually had clients tell me about is called Care Yaya, and this is local to the North Carolina area. This is a resource where you can find students who are in nursing or healthcare fields at local universities, and they will come care for elderly parents who might need companionship or some basic healthcare needs. There's also resources available on eldercare.acl.gov. We'll show you resources that you can find for aging parents so that you can stay in the workforce and continue to earning income during that time. There are a lot more resources for aging parents now through local community centers. There's Sarah Care, adult daycare, that we have some clients who use those resources, enables you to stay in the workforce during those years. And particularly with caring for elderly parents, that can end up being your peak earning years as well. So the years that can be really critical toward building that retirement income security for your future. A resource we mentioned on a prior episode, Grace and I actually talked about this on our episode 173 about terminal illness, is a book by Atul Gawande called Being Mortal. And in this book, he talks about the experience of his aging grandfather and how he was cared for in the home for a very long life by mostly women who, did not leave the home, did not have careers of their own, families of their own. In his words, they were almost enslaved to him based on his care. So we want to think about some of these technological innovations and things that are changing the way that we think about care and the way that we think about how women provide for themselves and others over the course of their lifetimes. And really, when we're talking about retirement income, the thing we need to access throughout the course of our careers is that compound interest. So we can build those retirement savings and security over the long term. So Darian, tell us a little bit more about how women can access the power of compound interest and how technology is changing that.
Yeah, so our final C for today's podcast is compound interest. And it's typically a term that most people in the finance industry are aware of, but it's not an everyday common household term. So I want to first start out with explaining what compound interest is, which is essentially the interest you earn on interest and your original account contributions in your savings and investment accounts. So essentially, as you contribute to those accounts, they earn interest and you earn additional interest on top of those amounts in the accounts. And one of the easiest ways to think about maximizing your power with compound interest is starting to invest early. So oftentimes when we meet with clients at different various stages of their life, we'll also recommend for younger people to begin starting early so they can maximize the benefit of the compound interest. Another way is to increase your savings. It's easy to set a target in our mind and continue with that savings target of maybe $200. Maybe you sweep it into your savings account, but never really increasing those. So another way to maximize your compound interest is actually to increase your savings at set intervals. Often this could be when you receive a raise, as we talked about compensation, or as you review your cash flow to determine, hey, I've got extra cash that I could be investing or saving in my accounts. But also you could do it annually. Often we continue to make changes to our contributions into 401k accounts as the limits increase each year. So that's another opportunity to see, technologically wise, do you have that feature in your 401k where you can increase your contributions each year? Another way to make sure you're maximizing that compound interest is to give it time to grow. Oftentimes we'll see our accounts grow a little bit and we'll use that as a reason to take money out of our accounts. For money you don't need after you've consulted again with compensation and maybe some caregiving responsibilities you have within your cash flow. Identify which accounts, especially those retirement accounts, which you can leave as is and continue to contribute so you get that time in the market for that compound interest to grow. Another thing I would add is just to keep it consistent. If you're not automating your savings, maybe just automate your habit of making regular deposits to those accounts. As you keep adding, you continue to maximize that ability for that compound interest to grow. Credit Karma is another more popular website that we've seen over the last few years that people are using to stay on track with where their credit stands. It's free, it's easy to use. Sometimes you may also see credit monitoring tools available with your credit card accounts, whether you've got a Chase account, Capital One, Discover. That's another tool that's now often available to see where you stand in terms of your credit history.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Because we definitely, while compound interest is so powerful, on the plus side, we don't want it to work against us. And really having credit card debt or consumer debt at a high interest rate, that's going to put that compound interest working against you instead of for you. So we want to be careful about that. And then the other thing to think about as we're looking to harness the power of compound interest is making sure that we're using good sources because there is so much more information available today. Technology has really opened up what we all are privy to, what we have access to, but there can be a lot of misinformation and some buyer beware. So we really want to caution any information that you might be finding from TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, friends, colleagues, even family members. We want to look for credentials and make sure that the information that we're using is good and appropriate for us. So, number one, we want to look for the CFP certification if you're looking for advice from a financial advisor. If you are setting up a compound interest and automated saving strategy, you want to make sure that you're doing that at a credible institution. So you want to make sure that's a quality custodian that has SIPC, Security Investor Protection Corporation insurance, or a bank that has FDIC insurance. So we want to look for those credentials, work with established banks and custodians. There are a lot of new ones coming onto the scene. And then just remember the old adage that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So some final comments just on the retirement building. And then finally, we talked a lot about caregiving, and women are traditionally caregivers in this world, caring for others. But it's also really important to make sure that we're practicing self-care and taking care of ourselves. There are a lot of resources out there that we can access today that were not there 20 years ago. There's online support groups for nearly everything you might be experiencing. There's even online therapy available today where you can meet with a therapist either digitally or over the phone. I know BetterHelp Online Therapy is one. Savvy Ladies is another organization that I have volunteered for in the past that offers free financial counseling to women who might be in need or who might be experiencing difficult domestic situations or potentially domestic abuse. A new part of the Secure Act 2.0 that just came out this year actually expanded the exceptions to the 10% early withdrawal penalty from IRAs. So victims of domestic abuse can withdraw the lesser of $10,000 or 50% of their account balance completely penalty-free if they are experiencing that and they need to get out of a bad situation. So these distributions can also be repaid to the same or another like account within 3 years. So these are some options that might be available to you if you need to take care of yourself and improve your situation. We'll also have links to Interact, which is a provider of domestic violence and sexual assault services in Wake County, and the Orange County Rape Crisis Center on this blog post as well. So we hope you found some good information today to improve the retirement outcomes for you or your loved ones. Thank you for joining us. If you have additional ideas, feedback, or questions, we would love to hear from you. You can find us and learn more on our website at financialsymmetry.com, where you can also download our pre-retirement checklist to start planning your ideal retirement today. We put these episodes out every 2 weeks. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one.